So today is a very casual talk about the very basics of like the ABCs of relationships. Just advice from me from whatever I've seen about relationships and all that stuff. And to be honest, it's actually very hard for me to state the obvious. Like I have this issue or problem. I don't know, Lydia always tells me that I have this problem of I always assume that people know everything, Like she always says, I'll be talking and I'll say that the story of this and this and this, and I won't actually say the story because I assume that everybody knows the story. And she says don't keep assuming that everybody knows the story, just say the story. And in the same way, with relationships, some stuff is very obvious to a lot of people, very, very obvious, and it should already be understood. But I get surprised over and over when people come and talk to me that it's not very obvious for everybody. So I just thought, it's good once in a while to just talk about the basics, or the right way to have a relationship, according to the church teachings, and according to our traditions, what is, all of that. So let me start with some funny things. The first thing is that I want to talk about is timing, and the reason that we have to start with this, if you're going to start a relationship, we're talking about relationships that lead to marriage, obviously, because our church doesn't believe in dating for the sake of for fun, or dating for just for the sake of passing time, but we call it courtship. When you want to get to know someone for marriage, and you're actually you have all the requirements already, then you can begin this process, okay? And it's a very different kind of thing. The way that the world does dating today is basically very unsuccessful. It has no fruit at all. There's the only fruit of it is that everybody just gets divorced and they go from one relationship to the next, and keep going. And some people even Western people have called it divorce practice. The type of dating they do today is divorce practice, because you just stay with someone for a while, and then when things get hard and it doesn't work anymore, you break up with them and you continue. And then even when you get married, you have this attitude that I've gotten over other relationships before, so if this is not working out, khalas, forget it, let me move on to the next person. So the first thing I want to talk about is the timing, or the age maturity thing. The first question I guess you need to ask yourself is, are you almost done with the required basics that you need to have in your life to be able to pursue a relationship that can lead to marriage? For example, if someone is 13 years old, it does not make sense for them to go shopping for a car at the dealership if you're going to get your license only at 16. That's an example that I could think of. Why go shopping for a car 3 years before? Everything is going to be different in 3 years, the market is going to be different, and you don't have a license. You don't want to buy a car and park it in your driveway, and every day walk by and be so tempted to drive it, but you actually don't have a driver's license. So it does not make sense to even start to be emotionally involved with anyone if you're not close enough to that point. A Song of Solomon says 3 times in Song of Solomon, it says, do not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. It's the Shulamite woman who says that. She says don't awaken love or stir up things before the time is right. And also I want to say something about the Song of Solomon, because the Song of Solomon also speaks about preparing a vineyard, and a vineyard is where they grow grapes for wine. Okay? So the Song of Solomon at some point kind of compares marriage or the relationship to someone keeping a vineyard. And let's make a comparison. So although the vineyard or vineyard has a fence to guard it, right? Every vineyard has to have a fence so that nobody comes in and ruins the grapes while they're growing, or animals. So the woman, although it has a fence, the woman is always warning us, be careful of the little foxes that can come in through the small holes and enter and ruin the vine, and ruin the tender, she says, the tender blossoms of the vineyard, okay, which are not yet ripe or not yet ready. So the farmer who spends his energy protecting his vineyard and the fruits will never regret it later, will be very pleased at the end when it's time for harvest that he protected his vineyard, right? And tending or taking care of a vineyard is a long, patient process of waiting and watching. You have to keep on waiting and keep on watching until everything is right. While keeping the walls, of course, is maybe one of the most important things in vineyard tending. It's not the only thing, because it's also about taking care of the tender blossoms or the grapes that are being grown, right? So likewise, in the same way, if we talk about if we talk about ourselves and relationships and stuff like that, tending our vineyard, so to speak, is not only like the fence can be compared to like just keeping your, like protecting yourself, like protecting your virginity kind of thing. Like that could be like the fence, you know. But other than the fence, there's like all the grapes that are inside, which is like, that can represent protecting our minds, protecting our eyes from lust, protecting ourselves from pornography, striving for purity in every way possible. That's the way, because even if you have your fence is still up, it could be that all the grapes are like in the mud. They're all getting ruined because they're not, like they're tender grapes and they're not ripe yet and they're like in the mud. Then we want to say, like before we move away from this example, the purpose of watching the vineyard from the beginning is what? Like it's not just like, the purpose of watching the vineyard is not in itself just to protect it, but the point of protecting it is that it has a wonderful purpose, is that at the end of the process or at the end of the harvest, you will be able to present your vineyard to your lover or your beloved one in full bloom, like in a beautiful way. You'll be able to present all these beautiful grapes so that you can both enjoy its fruit without any regret or guilt or anything like that. So St. John Chrysostom says about that, so he says, like this is very opposite of like what the world says, because nowadays the world does not really care very much for like virginity or purity, and it doesn't encourage people to abstain, for example, before marriage. But this is what St. John Chrysostom says. Why is it rotating so much? Yeah. Okay, then like this. Okay. He says, or do you think the fact of a virgin youth, like here he's talking about a virgin young man, and a virgin maid being united is a trifling contribution to their marriage? Like, do you think this is a small contribution to their marriage? It is no trifle, not only for the virtue of the youth, but for the maidens also. Will not then the charm of their love be wholly pure? Above all, will not God then be the more gracious and fill that marriage with countless blessings when they come together according to his ordinances? And he makes the youth remember his love always. And if he is held fast in this affection, he will spurn or like reject every other woman, or like turn away. I don't know, spurn is like okay. I don't know. So this obviously, like what I'm trying to say is that there is something so precious, and I've read like so much stuff about that. There's something so precious, and again, like I said in the beginning, this is like stating the obvious for me. Like of course we know that purity is important and keeping your virginity is important, but like I just, from the stuff that I hear, like it seems that to some people it's not that obvious, like as much as we think it's obvious, is that there is something, a special blessing, and there's something beautiful about that you could reap the fruit one day if you do things according to God's commandment. The point that I do want to say though is, even if a farmer has let his fence fall or some of the fruit in the vineyard have gotten damaged, it's never too late to be repaired or like restored by repentance. And Saint Moses the Strong, I don't know if it's him or not, but I always see it at the Saint Moses Monastery. But he says repentance turns adulterers into virgins. Although I don't think he actually said that, but I think they like printed it wrong and I memorized it ever since. I think it's like Saint Macarius or something. But anyways, and now I want to...
Oh no, it's Saint Augustine.
Saint Augustine, really? Very sure?
Yes, I.
Okay, that's good. All right. So I wanna do a little illustration about the timing. Like I've said this to some people like when I was talking to them individually, but I never like did it as an illustration. So we need 2 volunteers, maybe. 2. Okay, 2 volunteers.
I know this before.
Yeah, it's good. You could know it. So look, تعالوا معي. Okay, so who wants to go far? Who wants to go close?
I'll go for it.
Go far. Okay. So yeah, I guess. So go all the way to the other wall, like where the colonia is. We'll see her first, and then you can come مثلا from like you stand here. Okay. So this is like a visual that I always want everyone to remember because it's very helpful. The verse that says like do not awaken love until it pleases, right? That we read. It by the way, it comes up in 3 places. Do not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. Think of it as like I'm not going to light the match of like love and emotions and all this like Hollywood stuff until I'm actually close enough in every way, close enough to be able to light the candle of marriage. All right. So where's you still? Oh yeah. So if you are too far, like so, I want you to try to light the match now, like as someone who is lighting it too early, and try to get all the way here and light this candle. Let's see if you can make it. Never tried this.
She doesn't know how to.
I hope she fails. She doesn't fail at all. Well, try again. You can protect it with your hands if you
I
want.
can protect it. Okay.
But you have to start all the way from the back. There you go. It's on. Okay. Is this coming? It is. How can you do happy birthday at home?
On camera.
Any other volunteers? Okay, Mark. Practice matching. Danny, I was expecting you to come a bit further. It's hard. Okay, let's see what's Mario. Okay, so everything's exciting. There's love in the relationship, and everyone's
Don't burn yourself.
so happy and excited.
Boys are more serious.
Let's see if he's able to light it. Oh, so close.
Did your best, bro.
Well, Sarah, you ruined a really good relationship if you would have started this. You want to try from there? Maybe you'll make it. You can make it. You can do it. Oh. Yay! Mabrook. Clap for her. Okay. So what I'm trying to say, and then you see like once this phase is very risky and dangerous, just like you saw the match, like you have to protect it so much when you're walking and it's so volatile. Like that's exactly how it is in a relationship before marriage. In any state, it's like that. So as soon as like the candle is lit safely, like you see that it's a lot more like stable and you know, it's like this is marriage and this is like pre-marriage. So what I'm trying to say is that the timing is like super duper important, because if you start too late, statistics shows, even I was thinking of like making you all get involved and putting like 5 people in the back, 5 people here, 5 people here, and then if we were just to count the statistics of like how many people made it from the back, how many people made it from the middle, how many people made it, you'll see that just statistically speaking, you have much higher chances of actually getting to the end goal if you start at the proper time. And there is always going to be that exception of the person who started very far. And by the way, everybody thinks that they are the exception, but still, you're just, in the end, it's still a statistic. It's still going to be like 1 in 100 couples that will make it if they start from so long, or from so far away. But 100% of couples think that they are the exception, that they're going to be the one. Anyways, this is just like from what we've seen. So the first thing is like the timing. Then emotional maturity, it's also very important like that you're emotionally mature before you enter into a relationship. Emotional maturity means that you know who you are, and you know what you want in life, and you know what your goals are in life. Because young people often like, they still don't know exactly who they are, who they want to be. Like, you try like a different personality on every like 2 months, because you see different people. Like today, I had started preparing this topic, and as I was driving, like I saw like a guy and a girl like from high school walking together, but like you could see their like boyfriend, girlfriend, and like the guy's so immature. He's like skating on a skateboard, and she's walking beside him. I was like thinking to myself, like, you're so immature. Like you should not be in any relationship. Like who walks next to a woman on a skateboard and you expect her to walk, and you have like a mode of transportation? It's like so ridiculous. But that's, anyways. That's how like a lot of the relationships are, and nowadays it's very, yeah. So like next week he'll be into biking, and the week after he'll be like, skiing beside her. I'm just saying, like, you have to be emotionally mature, and I think the way to know that you're emotionally mature is if that you have been stable for a few years, even just like 2 years, مثلا, where you feel like you're stable, meaning like there's not a lot of changes like in like who you want to be, or who you think you are, or your identity, or like what your goals are in life. Like you've been stable for about 2 years, then you feel like, okay, خلاص, like I think and your father of confession and your close, trustworthy friends can tell you if you're at that level of maturity or not yet. And of course, the third point. So we talked about like age maturity, emotional maturity, and then spiritual maturity. We need to obviously be like, you can't be with someone who's like if you're like into, you have a good spiritual life and you're really seeking God, you can't just be with someone who like doesn't ever go to church or is not into it at all. Like you have to be spiritually mature yourself, and the other person also. You have to be like united in Christ and have the right foundation. And they taught us, oh, I forgot to glue this thing again, I keep forgetting. They taught us in the pre-marriage course about the triangle. Like, so they said, if the triangle is simply like, they say like that if you're here and the girl is here and this is God, like as you draw closer to God and as she draws closer to God, like the distance between you guys keeps becoming smaller, you see? Smaller. And you're only like united in Christ. So that's why this does not begin when you get married. It begins way, way, way before you get married. Like this process of, and it's a lifelong process. Even when you're together, you're going to be whatever. But I'm just trying to say that like, it's an important thing that you're both in Christ before you get together. Sorry, I forgot to glue these two little hearts. I wanted to like show the other demonstration. But then like I'm hammering a nail right now for Sanya. Only the toothpaste, even this. We're talking about the relationships, so we glued the hearts. We did the candle thing. This is the second illustration. And this is, not sure which one is going to work better, so I'll do both. This is her, and this is him. Okay. So, when you have an emotional, when you invest yourself emotionally with someone, whether it's the right time or not, you have to put glue. Okay, that's good. Whoa. Sorry. difficulties. I was never good at arts and crafts. Okay. Okay, so that's here. Put that inside. Leave it. Okay, so we spoke about the timing and the maturity and the emotional maturity, spiritual maturity. And yeah, like try to ask your father of confession or spiritual guide if they think you're ready for all this like early in the process, because it's very sad that I feel like a lot of people come like very late in the process. You know, like sometimes you get a person coming when they're already so emotionally invested in the other person and they're like, falas, they dream about them every night and day and they can't think of anything else, and then they ask Abuna like, do you think it's a good idea for me to, you know, and if Abuna tells them, or you know, anyone wise tells them like, no, it's actually a really bad idea right now, it's really hard for you to be like, oh, okay, I'll just give them a call, be like, it's not a good time. You know, like it doesn't work that way. I wish it was that simple, but it's not that simple, right? So, if you are ready, yani, like if all these things are kind of in place and you have the readiness part, like the candle thing that I forgot to blow up candle. If you are ready, then it's actually recommended, and I've read this from several church fathers, that it's recommended to get married earlier, like to get married younger than later. Like this is recommended, assuming that you are ready, for several reasons. Like they mentioned reasons like simple things like compatibility. They said like when someone is living a certain, like young people they adapt to each other's ways more easily and more quickly, and like it's more simple. Whereas like when someone is older and they have lived a long time alone, and then they try to come with someone else, each one is more like set in their ways. Like the cement has hardened a little bit, so like the like together. And also like there's a lot of other reasons, is that like we hit puberty at like 14 or something, and so from that phase on until we get married, it's like everything is a struggle, and keeping ourselves pure is a struggle. So even the fathers say like don't like let that extend very, very much. And you know, the modern Orthodox fathers say that like, yani zaman, people could get married as young as like 15, 16, but now there's a new era of like something called teenage years where people are just very immature for a lot longer. So it's true, like really it's true. Like people back then used to embrace adulthood at like the age of 15, 16, you would see they would be like almost adults in their way of thinking and whatever. But it's not like that anymore, and because of like school and the way that things are set up, like now I guess the recommendation now is like between like 19 and 25, because like that range is like the ideal, like I'm saying ideal, like it doesn't have to be, like don't tell yourself like I'm too young and whatever, like if you already feel like these things are in place, and if your father of confession thinks that as well. Then. But if you are too young, so here's the thing that I didn't mention about the whole like lighting the candle and all that stuff. I know realistically, like I was also young and I had emotions and stuff like that. I know that realistically, like it's not very easy to like turn on and off like your emotions for someone. Like if you have a crush on someone or if you like someone, it's not that easy to just be like, okay, no, I'm not like close enough yet, so I'm just gonna. All right, I acknowledge that, but there is still a way, like, if you honestly think that person is worth it and is worth waiting for, then the wisest thing you can do is to, like, play it cool until you get closer, you know? Like, the wisest thing you can do is walk with the match without lighting it, you know? Just keep thinking, like, I'd really like to light this match, I really want to light this candle, they're very nice, keep on praying about it, but stay like brother and sister only, don't even like tell them how you feel, all that stuff, like don't start the match until you're close enough, and then you actually have much better chances. But if you just start it from far, like you're fooling yourself, because the statistics are very, very much against you, and you're very, very unlikely to make it to the end. And some very few exceptions do, but most don't. So if there is someone that you think is like someone worth waiting for, then you have to play it cool and wait for them and بعيد لبعيد كده and just be like, you know, patient. okay. And then also, like, so assuming that someone is ready for the next step, we have to also talk about boundaries, like healthy boundaries. So the healthiest way to start is obviously to like meet in groups and to meet each other at church and or out like in groups, yani, and to just get to know each other, as brothers and sisters very normally. And it's, yeah, just think of it as, if the brother and sister analogy is hard for you to like imagine, then think of it as like treating them almost like any other guy or any other girl. Like if you're not gonna like text another guy at 3 in the morning, then don't text him at 3 in the morning. Like use the same analogy, like it's just a friend, it's just whatever, and then that's how you start, right? And then slowly, like as you take advice and you take the blessings of like the parents and the priest and things like that, then you can start to like take a further step of like, with counsel and stuff, you can start to maybe express your interest and tell them like, I'm just like interested in getting to know you a little bit more. Like everybody has their own like way of saying that. It's not like what we call pickup lines. It's not a pickup line. It's like you're not picking anybody up. You're just telling them like very honestly, so that they can like respect you and respect your. And sometimes, like in very traditional families, sometimes you have to do that with the father first. Not always. It depends on like everyone's culture and everything, because But like I know that in like my situation, like I had to tell Lydia's father like very early in the process, even before I myself was sure that I wanted to like get to know her, like that I wanted to proceed or not, just for the sake of like respecting, because he's very strict and stuff. So I had to just ask him on the phone. Also, it happened a bit accidentally because she accidentally gave me his number instead of her number, so like, I called him that night instead of calling her. Anyways, stuff like that. But like, it worked out well. I was able to tell him my intentions before we were able to talk and stuff. And then, so I'm just saying like the healthy boundaries are like all about like not investing all your emotions in someone and then not being able to like separate again. Like it should be light enough. Like you shouldn't be talking on the phone so much every day, every night, like all the time, not able to think or focus on anything else. Like that's not healthy, because if you don't end up together, then like you feel like you were ripped apart after, and like it's not a healthy way. So like it's a gradual getting closer. Until eventually, you take it slowly, and eventually, like you talk to the parents, and you all agree that like maybe we can have an engagement or something like that. And at that point they'll let you like go out alone. Like after like you've kind of done the group thing, like then there's usually a phase of like kind of going out alone, but like very carefully, like away from the Egyptians and all that whole game, so that you can like get to know each other, or in family context is even healthier, but like, I don't know, not everybody's comfortable with that, but if you can like go to each other's families, it's very good as well, But that's like a very conscious, that's what we call courtship. Like this is not dating, but this is what we call courtship, right before the engagement and stuff like that. Just some other points, like at random that I also told you like that come up a lot. Is like, let's just mention some points. I don't know, maybe they're not organized well, but one of the points is to consider when you are getting to know someone is compatibility. Like, طبعاً the age difference is important because that also has something to do with the way they think. Intellectually speaking, like you should be at the same intellectual level or somewhat, It shouldn't be like that someone is like completely like diarch and the other person is like, very, very intelligent. And because then you're not going to be able to have like meaningful conversations in your life, and you're going to be frustrated, like you're going to keep telling him like then spiritually, of course, you should be on the same why is Hamar like unacceptable? I used it on Palm Sunday like, in the sermon. What's the problem? Okay. دام في الإنجيل خلاص مكتوبة في الإنجيل. And then, so of course, like spiritual compatibility, we mentioned that before. very, very important, because if you want someone to, like, one of the main purposes of being married in the first place is for someone to help you get to heaven and get to your destination and be united with God. So if that person doesn't have that mindset, it's such a sad life. Like, I feel like, like imagine like being joined together like on an Olympic team where you have like a team, I don't know, the Jamaican bobsled team or something. And on that team, like one guy really wants to win the gold, but the other person really doesn't care. He couldn't care less. He's just like, I'm just here because they give you free uniforms and I really love the food. Like, don't bother me about practice. I'm just going to show up. Like, it's so frustrating for the athlete that wants to win the gold, So that's why it's important as well to have the same goal. And personality differences and stuff like, also to consider, because some people are very, like type A perfectionists in every way, and it doesn't mean that like let's say you're a very easygoing person or you don't take it. It doesn't mean that you can't like be compatible, but you have to like pay attention to like their personality when you're getting to know them and see like, are they gonna like comment about every small thing, and am I gonna get annoyed of that? Like get to know the compatible personality. And culturally also, because maybe someone, for example, that grew up here, even though we're all Coptic or whatever, like even if someone grew up here and then someone just came from Egypt recently, masalan, it might be that there's like a cultural difference in the way that they think or something like that, but it doesn't mean it's like, it just means like things to consider. And then family, you also have to consider that like you kind of marry the whole family, not just the person, especially in Middle Eastern cultures. So, it's very unfortunate, like, even if the person is great on their own and stuff, like the two things to consider are that like there's a portion of my life is going to have to be like interacting with their family, and if I can never get along with their family, then like it's going to be hard and it's going to cause a lot of issues. And the other risk is that a lot of people do end up like their parents eventually in one way or another, and similar. So that could also, if you can't stand the person's parents, it's a risk because they might like end up being like their parents. Anyways, and also you should try to gauge or like test if their parents are the type that are very, very involved in everything, and they still like, when you feel like someone has not grown up yet and they don't take their own decisions because their parents always tell them like what to do. At a certain age, that's not healthy anymore, and it's not about obedience, but it's about like that you need to be making your own decisions to a certain extent. And then the question that we get asked a lot is like, can people change? For example, if a girl meets a guy and he's like, I don't know, not into church, not into God, or not into being polite, not into dressing properly, not into whatever. Like, and she thinks like maybe, but inshallah, like when we get together, I'm gonna change him and he's gonna change. Like, I don't want to say that like people cannot change, because that's very depressing, and like, what else? Like, if nobody can change, then what are we all doing here? But at the same time, like in this particular point, I want you to be very pessimistic. Like, don't be too optimistic. Like, the amount of change is very, very little, and it takes like a miracle and the grace of God to change someone after the age of 25 or whatever, or 20. So, like, don't be too optimistic and say like, no, inshallah, akid, he's gonna change. Like, don't. I'm asking you to be pessimistic. Like, be negative in this point and say, chances are he's not going to change. Am I able to accept him the way he is or not? And the things that I might find cute now, like, will I find cute later? No, I think one time, like, when Anthony was talking to us, or I don't remember where I heard this, but he was saying something about, like, how the girl was saying, like, oh, he's so dependent on me, he can't do anything without me, it's so cute, I have to do everything for him and stuff. And he's like, in the beginning it's cute, but after a few years he'll be like, he can't do anything on his own. Like, he's like, it becomes the same thing that she thought was cute, becomes like extremely irritating, like much a few years later. Step on some. So, okay, I'll deal with my shoes later. Just a few more points. Mixed marriages, like, it doesn't mean that mixed marriages, like, will not work, but also the statistics say that like a lot of mixed marriages are a bit harder to deal with, because not only are two people coming together who are different personalities, but now there's like a different background, a different culture, a different way of raising, a different way of doing church, and all the traditions that we're used to. So if it's like someone who's Mexican, for example, or Jamaican, or someone who's Italian, or any other nationality, it just brings in more differences into the mix that you have to deal with, so that should be considered. And it doesn't mean it's impossible, but it's a lot harder, and especially like the Coptic church life will be very, very highly affected. Like, if not for you, then for your kids, for sure. And then just small points about engagement. Engagement periods should be very like smooth, in my opinion. I don't know, this is a personal opinion, but I don't believe that people that have horrible engagements should proceed and say like inshallah and marriage is going to be great, except if like the pressure is coming from outside. Like what I mean is like if it's not problems between them, but it's like some sort of pressures from outside, like from, I don't know, like parents that are still like being picky about things, or interferences from outside. Okay, like that might mean that like afterwards things will get better. But if there is problems from the inside, like I think engagement should be like super smooth, because that's when everyone is at their best behavior. Everyone is like trying to act like a star at that time. Afterwards they're like, close that goes now. And also like engagement ceremonies should be very simple. These are like I said at the beginning, a lot of these are just personal opinions from what I've observed. The reason that engagements should be very simple is that it's still a test. It's still like, regardless of what everybody says, and even if we all hope 100% that the engagement will become a marriage, it's still an engagement. It's still not final. And so it should be simple, so that you don't put social pressure on yourself and say like, but I invited 500 people came to the engagement, and like, I don't know, like we spent so much money and we did all this stuff, like how can I like break it up now, and then you're like, you're in a spot where you feel like the relationship is wrong, but the social pressure of everyone, it makes you continue just because of the pressure. So that's why, like, make it simple with your family, somewhere nice, keep it simple. In the engagement period also, you need to be careful about something, is that engagement does not mean that you are half married. It's not, like, it doesn't work like that. The sacrament of marriage means you're 100% married, and engagement you're still like 0% married. Like, you're not married at all. So what I'm trying to say is that it's also very, very important to watch ourselves in this phase. Like 1 Corinthians 7, verse 1 says, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. So in this phase, it's very important to protect your purity, and like not to assume anything, or not to say like malish or engaged or whatever, because there's still a high chance that this is going to be someone else's wife or someone else's husband. So you wouldn't want to, like, if you think of it that way, like if you look at a married couple, or you look at like your parents, for example, you don't want to imagine like another person like kissing your mom or something. Like, it's disturbing a little bit if you think of it. So in the same way, that's really what happens when people are like doing something, and then afterwards like they don't end up getting married. So like you're actually like, that's someone's future spouse that you're with, so be careful. And also, I guess, sorry, I think this would be the last point, yes, is that marriage is a sacrament, and there's a certain dignity and reverence that comes with practicing the sacraments. And so it should not be preceded or followed by improper behaviors, or like parties that are improper. Like, it shouldn't come before or after. Like bachelor parties and wedding receptions should be occasions of joy. It should be occasions of like, telling bachelor party, like telling your friend, yeah, we're happy for you, we congratulate you and stuff like that. Like, but the world, like, and the way that the world practices these kind of things is always like inappropriate and not proper. We don't have to imitate the world. Like, it's, yani, you could have a bachelor party and have a very respectable thing, and we can have a wedding reception and also have a very respectable, yani, respect the sacrament for what it is. The sacrament doesn't mean like we walk out of church and like, khalas, it's over, So like, just the environment of like loud and impure music and drunkenness and all that stuff like belongs to unbelievers. It does not belong to Christians, and I don't feel the need to stand up here and prove it to you or tell you verses or anything like that. It's just like, I know very, very well that it's simple, the presence of God. Like, you could feel the presence of God in a place or the absence of the presence of God in a place. So I want you guys to, in this particular thing, make a stance and change the culture. Like, if you want to, you can be the change. You can be the one to change the culture by everyone choosing in their own marriage to like make it, do it well, to like put Christ first and like forget the way that the world does weddings. Like, who cares? It's a very big honor and blessing for people to say like, man, this wedding was like so different, or it wasn't like, it wasn't like a normal wedding. This is a blessing, like, for us to do weddings differently. And even if you have to like stand up to your parents, like in this is the first event as a married couple. So khalas, you got married in church, and now you are actually a family, you're a married couple. So, and that is why I say that this is the one event that, like, from this point on, I say, stand up to your parents. If your parents are the ones, in many cases, the parents that want, like, a certain type of like big party, like hishik bishik party, like, whatever. So if it's your parents that want that, this is the time to stand up to your parents and say like, Malish, I said okay about everything you wanted for the wedding, but like, this is our life now, and we begin our life, and I'm not going to start my life after the sacrament like this. Like, this is not okay with me, I'm not going to do it, that's, no. Like, that's when you say no, and if they give you trouble, like, come to me and like, I'll yell at them or something, but like, that's, yeah, be strong, Okay, does anybody have any comments or questions? Or try to remember. Oh, I forgot to. Yeah, so this is like something that they did with us in Africa or something. Yeah, it was like someone was giving a youth talk. So this is like when you attach yourself emotionally to someone, and then you come to like separate. Like, it doesn't work out, and you separate. Like, it shows that like your heart is affected. Like, your heart is not really the same, because there are pieces of his heart on you and there are pieces of her heart on you. And so that even when you come to make a new bond, like, this piece is always going to be there, and it's going to be different, So what I'm trying to say is, like, it's okay. It doesn't always work out from the first time for most people. It's fine. But if we practice proper boundaries, then this separation does not need to be so hurtful. It could be much smoother. It could be like, smoother. I'm sure this one's not going to be smooth at all. Ah! Anyways, sorry. Glory to God.